Hi, welcome to Salto del Gato. This is your host Marilia. Today's video is about the Rudy Farias case. It is rather long, so I've split it into two parts. I've had to use a different film editor, video editor, and so it may not be in the usual format. It is the best I can do at the time. This video has a lot of information, a lot of players. I do hope you enjoy the story. Hello, welcome to Salto del Gato. This is my YouTube channel. This is my gumshoe playlist. I'm your host Marilia, and I want to welcome you. Those of you that are returning subscribers, you know I appreciate you coming back to visit. Those of you that are new, welcome. I hope you enjoy what I'm going to present for you. I am going to talk today about a particular crime that's trending, and that's kind of what I do here. Now let's just get into it. So today's crime is the Rudy Farias case. So in this video, I'm going to tell you the story about Rudy and his mother. Even though Rudy is a victim of it, it's his mother that really stands out in this crime and their relationship. That's what the story is about. I'm going to have to revert to a couple of notes just to follow the chronology. Rudy's mother's name is Janie Santana. I think they're of some kind of Latino or Hispanic ancestry, either Central American or Mexican, or I don't think that they're Caribbean, but who knows? But they're of a Hispanic ancestry. I think that they're all originally there from Texas, and this crime is taking place in Houston, Texas. Now, Houston, Texas, per se, at least from my perspective, I've always thought of it because of all of the industry there, the oil industry and whatnot in Texas, then you always think of certain cities in Texas as being quite affluent. And Houston and Dallas, has always been my perception, that they are economically quite prosperous communities. So keep that in mind. Janie had two sons. She had a son named Charles and a son named Rudy. So her son Charles unfortunately was killed in an accident. I don't know if it was a car accident or a motorcycle accident. I don't know the details of it. But this occurred on February 13th of 2011, and he unfortunately was killed. That left Janie with one son, Rudy. And Rudy was younger than Charles was. Now, Rudy's father was Rudy Farias III. He was a Houston Police Department officer. He was never married to Janie, but they had a rather quite friendly relationship that at some point became intimate because Rudy was a product of that. So Janie, as we will soon find, has quite a colorful history. But in this particular case, she had a DNA test administered in order to get Rudy III to provide child support for his son, which she did successfully. And him being a Houston police officer, that was automatically deducted from his paycheck. And you can go online and you can see that there's a long history of where he paid child support for years to her. But on August 19th of 2014, he self-selected out of life with his government-issued weapon in his patrol car. He decided to exit. He was discovered deceased in his car, and the reasoning behind that is because I believe he was being investigated for a ticketing scam, and that ticketing scam involved writing multiple tickets from various locations at the same time, and they were caught because you can't be in 2 or 3 places at the same time, especially if they're quite a distance away. Now, I don't know if the reason for this was to claim extra hours of work, or if there is some kind of an incentive for these officers to write more tickets. Maybe they get a kickback or something for them. I'm not sure. So that's all my magical thinking. You'll hear me refer to magical thinking throughout my narrations of these things, because as I start researching and I find all these facts, I kind of put them together in my head, and I'm just making assumptions, speculating from the gossip and rumor mills that are running out there. So I actually call that GRIZ, gossip, rumor, innuendo, streams. And so from that, I form my own magical thoughts about what might have occurred or the reasons behind it. So that was, I believe, the reason that he chose to take his life out of the earth. And he did not want to face any criminal charges or the scrutiny investigation, and who knows how deep that ran. So for Rudy the Fourth, his son, they don't appear to have had a close relationship at all, or any, because he makes a post. I don't know if it was an email that he was sending to somebody, or he was just doing a Facebook post or something. But he writes that he never thought that his losing his father would have affected him, because they never had a close relationship. But he's writing about how deeply he was affected. And I guess he regretted never having gotten to know his father and having had a relationship with him. So this is happening in 2014. On March 6th of 2015, Rudy Farias IV goes out in the evening and takes his dogs for a walk. He had two of them, somewhere around his subdivision where he lived. At some point, he hasn't returned, and people are asking, where is he? Where is he? People being, I'm assuming, his mother. She gets the word out that he's missing, and people start looking for him, and that turns into a report of a missing person, and it escalates from there with the usual responses from communities, which is search parties are organized and launched, and they start searching the woods and the swamps and the highways and anywhere to see if they can find him. They never found him. They found the dogs, but they never found Rudy. And so he just stayed as a missing person for 8 years, because I guess the case went cold. So during that time, his mother was frantically, from outward appearances, reaching out to nonprofit charitable organizations throughout the country that help people in this situation, to see if she can get additional funds to help search for her son, allegedly. And some of the costs involved in that are like paying for billboards. There were several billboards that were put up for Rudy, for search parties, for investigators. So she went from place to place that had these kinds of funds that were donation-based available to assist in these matters. And these agencies are always happy to do this. That's their whole purpose. And she did. She got several agencies to give her $2,000 here, $2,000 there. There was a GoFundMe page that was launched that raised about $2,025. She also received that. So throughout the years, she is consistently receiving, taking advantage, and that's a key word, of any of these opportunities that she could to acquire some funds that allegedly she would use to find her son. Let's move forward to June 29th of 2023. on June 29th of 2023, a male, unresponsive male person is found. Various sources say various things. Some say on the steps of a church, others say on the doorway of a church. And he's unresponsive. He appears to have been beaten. He is bruised and bloody and non-responsive. However, they do find some documents on him. By documents, I mean it was either, depending on the version that the Grizz talks about, it was either just a card with a name and number on it or a credit card. And through that, they were able to track down the name that the credit card was issued under and find a way to contact that person. That turned out to be Janie. This turned out to be her son, Rudy, who had been missing for 8 years. So when the two were reunited, well, you can imagine. I don't know who started the information leaking out to the media, whether it was Janie herself, or if you know how there's police dockets that there are police logs, I think is what they're called, where activities that take place are logged. And there are sleuthers who monitor these things to get some, new tips on new crimes or something new coming up. Somehow or another, this got out that this young man who had been missing for 8 years has reappeared. And you can imagine the response of the community and the media and the sleuthing community specifically. This was one of those anomalies that everybody was ready to celebrate, that somebody who had been missing had, beat the odds and returned in life, in bad condition, but in life. So from here, things get a little murky. Because here's where magical thinking has to come in. I'm not sure whether the police actually came, addressed this, and looked at him in his condition and said he needs medical attention, or if they called the number, were able to identify that this was a mother and son, and just released him to his mother, expecting that she as a parent would take him in for medical care. So the question of, did he get any medical attention? Was he seen by anyone after this incident? I don't know. The Grizz also says that there was a car accident involved. So, and again, details are murky. I don't know but it seems to have been alleged that he took his mother's car. So whether that was stealing the car, I don't know. But another source, a family member source, says, how could he steal the car if she had left the keys in the car? But supposedly the car that he had been involved in an accident is how he wound up allegedly on the premises of this church. So at the very least, there had to be an accident report, right? And somebody should probably look into that. That's not the kind of work that I do, but there's a question there. What happened if he had an accident and he totaled the car? What did he hit? Did he hit another vehicle? Did he run into a pole? What happened? I'm not clear on any of that. I'm not even sure if the car was really a part of any of this. So right there, as I start looking at this, I'm thinking, how convenient that he would, if he did take the car and he did have an accident, two things are very convenient. That he winds up in close proximity or on the property of a church. That's kind of an ideal situation. Eventually someone would find him. And how convenient that he had some documents, the only documents on his body, that helped identify who his mother was after 8 years. So to me, immediately this screams, Houston, we got a problem, because there's more to this than meets the eye. I, from my skeptical eye, think this looks staged to me. Very staged. So let's then follow what happens. 8 days go by after this incident. He is back with his mother in their home. I have no idea what happens. Have no idea if he ever goes to a hospital. But I am assuming that in response to all the media attention that she was getting, because I'm sure media were calling her, contacting her, maybe even going to her house. Certainly social media must have been crazy. She starts posting information about his condition. And she goes into detail that he was just in really bad condition, that he was nonverbal, that he had all these different types of injuries that she, let me see if I can find where she describes his injuries. She says, Rudy is in pretty bad shape. He has cuts, soft tissue tumors, small openings, and swelling on the soles of his feet, along with bruising, old and new cuts, scrapes on his body, old dry blood on his head and hair. He has very, very dark complexion now, almost unrecognizable, she wrote. This is on her Facebook post. And she says, God only knows what he has endured during his time away from home. He flinches if you try to touch him or hug him, thinking we are going to strike him. And he thinks his name is Julio Torres, and he is 14 years old now. Now, she also posts a picture of him in a hospital bed. So she's trying to deflect everybody's attention to leave us alone. He needs some privacy. You can't talk to him. He's nonverbal. He's traumatized. To look, he's in the hospital. Don't go there. And he actually shows a picture of someone in a hospital bed, all of their head covered. The only thing that's visible is the top of their head. She claims this is him. Well, these news bits start flowing out into the media, and everybody is watching this either on YouTube or on the news channels and the local news. And so the neighbors start realizing that they're talking about Janie and her house, because they even show the house. And they're like, wait a minute, who is missing? And then they show a picture of Rudy, and the neighbors say, whoa, he's never been missing. He's been there all these years. His name is Dolph. We know him as Dolph. And he interacts with various neighbors, came out and said he interacted with them. He came to their house frequently, that he was in their garage, that he's always been around. He's never been missing. Family members start coming out that they have had suspicions for years, and they'll start documenting why. But they say that several years ago, reports came to them that he was actually living in a neighbor's backyard. I don't know what they mean by living in somebody's backyard, because if somebody's in my backyard, I would see them. So I don't know if they were maybe backed up into the woods and they meant that he was living in the wilderness back there, or if he was crashing on their porch. I don't know, but allegedly they called the police. If there's such a thing, if that actually happened, I'm sure there's a police report. No one that I know of has come up with that police report yet. So allegedly, according to the family member, they called the police, and the police came out. They didn't find anything, so they dropped it. So they start, I guess, calling and reaching out to different local news outlets. Now, I don't know if you know how the news does. I think the news outlets started coming out to the house, and the neighbors who saw some of the news outlets, that might have been how they decided to talk to the neighbors, or if news outlets actually went out to the neighbors, since they couldn't seem to talk with Janie and, to find out what they thought or get some feedback. And it's somehow in this process, the news gets adrift that the neighbors are saying he's never been missing. And of course, there was a story there, and they start sleuthing, saying, what do you mean that he's never been missing? And then they start talking to more and more people, and then they start, other extended family members start reaching out to the news media and the story starts erupting. I am sure that because of that this might have motivated the Houston Police Department, who seems to have just let this go for 8 days, to go back out and reach out to these people and find out what's going on. So they do that. But I think at this point, Janie realized that this was getting out of hand as far as the media, and she moved them temporarily to a hotel. I don't know what hotel, but they went into a hotel room. Somehow or another, the police contacted her and said that they wanted to talk to her and Rudy. And so she immediately realized she was not going to be able to avoid that. So enters in a new party. This man's name is Quanell-X. I'll get more into who he is later on. But for right now, he is a community activist. So his role is that when someone in the community has an issue with, I guess, police departments, he comes out and acts as a liaison between the family or of the victim or the perpetrator and the police. And obviously this is not an uncommon thing. It's we see it all the time in crimes. Families of the victims, or oftentimes even the perpetrators, they will hire an attorney to, deal with the press and with the police and whatnot. So he plays that role, except he's not a lawyer. He's a community activist. And I don't know I know some of his background, but I don't know what his educational background is and what qualifies him to act in this role. And actually, I don't know what other requirements, educational requirements for a community activist. I mean, can anyone just become a community activist? Look at some of our House of Representative members. They have no experience. They're not lawyers, but somehow or another, if they get people to vote for them, they get into office. So that ought to tell you something. He goes out and he agrees to be at the meeting with Janie, Santana, Rudy, and the police department. So he arrives there and he describes what he saw as a very traumatized Rudy, who was crouched and clinging to his mother's leg. He was terrified, and his hands, he says, they were like shaking like a leaf in the wind. And he reached out and said, well, may I talk to Rudy? And his mother, Janie, says, no, he's nonverbal. He's nonverbal. So the police officers, in the process of this conversation, I'm sure other things were said, but at some point the police officers say to her, well, okay, then we will come back. You contact us and let us know when he's in a condition that he can speak. We'll come back and talk to you. We'll interview him. Now, that seems odd to me, because wouldn't the police say, wait a minute, 8 days have passed, he's in no better shape, let's get somebody out here to evaluate him. I don't know if that's within the parameters of the law that would allow the police to request that. I don't know what the legal rights are there. At this point, Quanell says to Rudy, he says, hey guy, how are you? And Rudy acknowledges him. So Quanell asks him, can I talk with you? And Rudy agrees. He says yes. So when the police are saying, well, since he's nonverbal, we're going to come back, Rudy says, now wait a minute. He's talking now. Because I think Quanell asked him a couple of other things and he responded to him. So Quanell tells the police, he's talking now, so let's give him a chance. So further conversations take place, and Quanell asks Rudy, okay, are you willing to talk to the police and tell them what has happened to you? Rudy says yes. And so Quanell says, okay, he's going to talk to you, and he's getting ready to remove himself from the room. But Rudy, this is according to Quanell, I don't know what Rudy really did. I wasn't there. The police aren't confirming that this is what actually happened, but this is Quanell's version, that Rudy insisted that he stay there. And the police actually objected, and especially the detective that was going to interview him. Quanell claims that he has it either recorded. I don't know if that means video or by audio only, but he has recorded, according to Quanell, a heated discussion between him and the detective was protesting, objecting to Quanell being present. But eventually Quanell got to be present. So Quanell says that he was sitting next to Rudy and the police officer was sitting next to Quanell, or detective, and they interviewed him. Sometimes they allude that there was more than one police officer there, but I'm not sure. And they actually remove the mother. I guess they take her to another room and they close the door, and they're having a conversation with Rudy. In that conversation, Rudy tells a horrific story of years and years and years of abuse. Physical, verbal, intimate, emotional, psychological, you name it. He starts relaying a story that he was gone for 1 or 2 days. You know, everything in this story has conflicting facts attached to it. And all of this that I'm getting is coming through, you know, gossip, rumor, innuendo streams from online, from the media, from extended family members, from Quanell's team, from posts that Janie is doing. So who knows what the truth is. And I'll get to what the police basically has come out with, because most investigations, we follow what the police is saying. But we have found that oftentimes there's more to what the police is saying, and there's a lot more that they're not saying. So let's keep that in mind. Anyway, Rudy starts outlining that he came and returned home a day or two after he had run away, and that in that time he had spent years under the control of his mother, and that his mother had abused him. She had beat him. She had locked him in the house. She had basically treated him as her slave. He had to do whatever she told him he could do, and that she forced him to sleep in the bed with her, and oftentimes she slept in her birthday suit, and that she would force affection upon him of an intimate level, and that involved a lot of kissing and touching and further intimacies. Now, this is Quanell's version. And Quanell has, I think, kind of used interpretive language to interpret what was actually said. Because I think what was actually said was that she made me sleep in the bed with her, and she told me that I had to be the daddy. Now, we can insert whatever we want into that through our magical thinking processes. What the heck does she mean, the daddy? At some point, Quanell says that Rudy said, she told me I had to be her husband now. He alluded to a situation when Rudy was in the shower taking a bath, and she would come in her birthday suit, open the shower curtain, and join him there. And we're led to believe that there was more than a shower going on there. So now that we're shocked, because I was shocked, I'm like, what? But you know, in the true crime community, you hear so many outlandish stories that turn out to be factual that you don't put anything past the realm of possibility. So we get this horrific story of this person's 8 years under the control of his mother. And it appears that she had used fear to keep him under her control, because now he's, you know, it's 8 years later. He's 25 years old. Well, there's also, I should say, a discrepancy about his birthday. He was born October 1st of either 1996, which would make him 26 years old now, and 18 years old when he's disappeared, or 1997, which would make him 17 years old when he disappeared and 25 years old now. But even at that stage, now that we see what is being played out, if any of this is true, because at this point, honestly, I even question Rudy. How authentic is this and his story? And how complicit was he, or was he really truly a victim? I am sorry, I have those questions. But let's assume, giving him the benefit of the doubt, that he was a victim of his mother. Then, going back 8 years, he has been controlled by fear. She convinced him that because he had gone missing for a day or two, that the police had expended all these resources, and that now that was a crime, and he was going to be arrested and thrown in jail. That's the story Quanell tells to explain why Rudy in 8 years never made an effort to get any help, especially since it seems like he was able to leave his house quite often because he went to neighbor's house and visited. And he had a phone, because one of the neighbors say that anytime she would text him, so he had a phone. So he had a way to communicate and reach for help, and he didn't. I understand that there's all this stuff about the Stockholm syndrome, and if that's really a thing here, if it applies in this case, how, the victims become controlled. I mean, there was even a horrific case where the victim fell in love and protected a person who kept her in a cage and abused her for years. So the mind is an interesting thing, and how it tends to formulate itself in order to survive, who knows? And if Janie is as an abusive a person as she is beginning to appear as being, anything is possible. And maybe by the time he ran away, because that I think was a stage thing by her. I don't think that's me. That's my magical thinking. I think that was even staged. But let's just assume that he did attempt to run away. He must have been such a vulnerable, victimized person from early on in his life that I could see where he could be easily manipulated and controlled through all these years, to do her bidding. So the public, those of us who are concerned, and our hearts go out to someone like Rudy, who may have been living in a living hell for the last 8 years, we validate that absolutely it could have possibly happened to him if he was that vulnerable and if he was that traumatized by her. Hell yeah, she's a monster. Unless he's not completely innocent. And I'm not trying to victim shame or put blame on him or responsibility. As I continue the story, you'll probably be just as confused, because I think that the original claim that he ran away was staged. And I definitely think that the original he has resurfaced is staged. And for all of the reasons that I said, between she was getting money from here, there, and everywhere. So money was a motivator behind that. But now that all this media attention comes out, after that meeting with the detectives and Quanell says that for a short, brief moment, she was put in handcuffs. Now, during the time that they're meeting, Quanell, the detective, and Rudy in the hotel, she's knocking on the door furiously, trying to come in. Is he okay? Is he having a panic attack? She keeps saying he's going to have a panic attack. And they tell her, no, he's fine, and he's talking to us. I'm thinking it was the detective who said that. And so she can't come in, but she's trying aggressively to intervene and to control the situation. After the meeting took place, Quanell says that he saw her briefly in handcuffs, but then she was released from the handcuffs. And then she was allowed to go into the room with her son, and that she sat in front of him, and she was telling him, now you need to tell them that this was all a lie, and you need to tell them that a different story. Quanell claims that he had a Facebook journalist, someone from the community who has a Facebook page who does a lot of sleuthing. And she has a pretty intense following, and intense, I mean, from that community. I don't think she's known outside of the community, but in her community, she's pretty popular. And she came along with Quanell because I believe that the way that this all played out is her name is Grizzy. She has a Facebook following for sleuthing and community involvement. I guess she highlights what's going on in the community. And Janie reached out to her to contact Quanell and get him involved because she presented her case to Grizzy as she needs protection from the police. So Quanell agreed to show up and Grizzy accompanied him. And so Grizzy acts as someone who documents what's going on because she's recording the proceedings. Quanell has also expressed that he realizes now that the reason that Janie requested Grizzy contact him and get him involved is because she thought she could manipulate him to protect her from the police. But as this story mushroomed, he is definitely not on her side. So after the meeting ends, he comes out and he's visibly upset. In fact, he's in tears. Are those tears really emotional tears? Or is he the kind of person that gets so spit mad that he cries? I don't know. Because one of the things that after watching a bit of Quanell, he's a highly volatile person. He displays his emotions quite readily and very assertive in the way he expresses himself. And most of the time, he speaks loudly. So I don't know if he's speaking that way, because I'm a person who I speak loud all the time. People think I'm shouting. I'm not. It's just the way I talk. Or if he was genuinely angry and emotionally upset and he was crying. Or if he's just a really good actor. I don't know. I don't know who Quanell is. But anyway, he comes down. He knows there's media out there, and he talks to them, and he gives details, and he's not using appropriate descriptors for what he claims Rudy told him. He tells him, the media, that he was SA'd, that he was made to do certain acts with his mother, and he goes into specific detail. So, and he's angry and he's upset, and that takes place on the day of the meeting. I watched that, his conference with the media after his meeting with Janie and Rudy and the cops, and I was horrified. I was just horrified for Rudy and just shocked that a mother would do this to her son, what was being alleged there. So, I mean, I was, even in my state of being totally horrified and upset by a mother doing this, I was also very taken back with this person who's in the role of a community activist, which is a liaison between families and police departments, which I assume also works with the police department, that they would come out and divulge so much information out into the public, intimate information from a person who is allegedly very vulnerable, who has already been victimized and who is in a very diminished psychological capacity. And so this person has entrusted all this information to Quanell, and he just comes downstairs and tells the world. Not only was that, I think, inappropriate, but what about his boundaries following any protocol with the police? So the next day, the police holds a press conference. Well, I'm going to end it here because this video is going to be about an hour and a half long. So I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to make a part 1 and a part 2. So this is the end of part 1. Join me in part 2 and we will discuss the police conference and much more there. I want to thank you so much for spending this little time visiting me. I want you to know I appreciate you. I hope that you'll stick around and come and join me in part 2. We have a lot more to cover on this case. Thank you.